I know this thing is on, and I know that you can hear me. Nursing and healthcare needs advocates and activism. So, what are you waiting for?
What do music and healthcare have in common? You might be asking yourself that question. I've asked myself that question, but I think it might have a lot more in common than you think of. The music industry is fast-paced, it's very demanding, and it asks a lot of people who, want to hear from music. We like to be entertained, but sometimes we might forget about the people who might be behind making the music. Similar to nursing, fast-paced environment, very demanding, and I think sometimes people forget about all the work that goes into us caring for others. And I think that you'd be surprised to know that these two industries actually have a lot in common. So today we're going to talk to a musician who knows a lot about healthcare, who knows a lot about music, and has actually had some conversations about healthcare as well as mental health. So let's welcome Catherine Harrison to the show. Catherine Harrison is a human-centered leadership expert and mental health strategist with 35 plus years of corporate entrepreneurial experience. As founder and president of Revolios, she helps organizations build, measure, and sustain leadership practices that balance high performances with genuine care, especially in creative industries and life sciences. Her work draws on deep expertise in organizational development, behavior change, mental health literacy, academic research, along with her lifelong career as an award-winning Canadian musician. Since 2018, she's investigated international mental health in the music industry, and in 2025 led the groundbreaking Canadian Soundcheck, using mixed methods approach that gathered feedback from more than 1,500 Canadian music workers, bringing creativity and humanity to every space she works in. Welcome, Catherine, to The Gritty Nurse. I'm so excited to have you on.
I am too, Amie. We've been kind of shadowing each other for many years, I think.
We have, I think, just kind of during the pandemic. That's kind of so we've known each other for, online for quite some time. But now this is the first time that I got to interview you. And I think I've been watching some of your work. I think we do have a lot of things in common. And maybe just to start off, so my guests and my listeners have a little bit of a better idea about who you are, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, and maybe just a little bit like how healthcare might have touched your life.
So I am currently a music industry leadership consultant, mental health strategist, lifelong musician and songwriter. I am a researcher. I just wrapped up the first Canadian national study on the daily realities of people working in the Canadian music industry, specifically aligned to mental health and well-being. I have a master's degree in psychology and 35 years across many different iterations, but 23 of them in healthcare here in Canada through the pharma and bioscience space. So still spend a lot of time consulting psychological health and safety in that space as well as music. And I run a social enterprise called Revolios, which is focused on leadership development in the music industry, how to drive performance while not leaving a trail of bodies behind. And we also, I just founded a nonprofit called Soundcheck Collective, which is really based on the feedback that I got through the research that everyday music professionals want to learn basic leadership skills, interrelational skills, mental health know-how. So we have to also, very aligned with what you do, focus on promotion and prevention and get away from only pathological remediation and treatment. Yeah, any and all of those things.
I mean, all of those I think some people might be like, how is this related? But I think there's so much that actually is relatable, because you just mentioned that whole aspect of, making sure that people don't burn out, because I would say that in music and probably within nursing, we're all high performers, right? We want to do the best that we can. But I think our respective, professions put a lot of pressure on us. And sometimes that pressure comes with us, again, feeling that we can't meet these expectations, and leads to issues related to burnout. So how and when did you start talking about burnout within the music industry?
Wow. I mean, I think always. So I've always been fascinated by the human condition. I've always had a combination of sort of science and focus on health and well-being. My background was actually physical education and kinesiology and economics. So there was always this sort of art and science, business and science, and I don't think, I always felt it bizarre that we would separate health and well-being from work conversations,
Right.
because human beings with all of our humanness show up in the workplace. And the fact that we often want people to cleave off those aspects of themselves when at work, I think adds that added element of disconnection, of suboptimal health and well-being, suboptimal mental health and well-being, ridiculous expectations, almost a dissociation from ourselves, thinking like, why can't I just do this better like everybody
Right.
else? And it's all kind of BS, right? Like, we are human beings with finite resources. We are incredibly resilient and adaptable. And yet we only have so much energy in our health and well-being, as nursing,
Right.
you know. And so I've always been fascinated and a little bit curious as to why there wasn't more of that conversation, in any workplace, but certainly within healthcare and then in the creative industries too. Like, we expect people to be able to create art that connects with our humanity. And a lot of that is very expressly sharing their human experiences, good, bad, or sad.
Right.
So it's interesting. And honestly, like, in preparation for this call, Amie, I was thinking about really I've really concluded there's a lot of parallels between nursing and musicianship, or even just working in the music industry and working as a nurse in the healthcare system. And one of them is that society takes us for granted.
Mm.
Society, certainly here in Canada, society says, I expect that they're always going to be there when I need them and want them. And they forget that there are human beings trying to live their lives and their professions. And they forget that those people are also dealing with a finite amount of health and all the other, familial and social things that come along with that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I think this notion of like public good, but a private individual cost, is really similar in both of those professions.
Yeah, like I almost think about it in terms of just performance, right? So like we are expected to perform at these very high levels, right? Almost not that nurses are entertainers, but in the sense that we are providing a service, right? And we're expected to be able to do all of these different things. And really, we've seen sometimes what the return looks like, and sometimes the return is not very good. I would say that in instant, like, we could mention, I think a lot of people go back to juxtaposing and talking about the pandemic, where a lot of people were very excited about, nursing and what nursing can do. And then all of a sudden, that excitement turned into rage. And I kind of think about even just like the music industry too. And maybe you probably better know than I do that, again, music is one of those things. And I think that, it's such an important element to our society, because I think music does so much good for individuals as well. Whether that's healing, whether that's through a song that's written that means and touches someone in a particular way. But again, we have to remember at the end of whether it's a musician or a writer or a nurse, that there's an end user. And there's only so much that we can continue to give unless we continue to get something back. And I'm kind of like, what are your thoughts? Because you mentioned it too, where it's just like at the end of the day, there has to be some form of, respite. And in the music industry, what does that look like? Like how, like if you're putting out so much, how it, like at what point in time where they're saying, you should check your feelings at the door, what would you say to people who are saying that to you within your own industry?
Yeah. Well, I think you've already articulated one of the most important aspects, is the parallel performance, which is, regardless of how you feel physically, emotionally, what's going on with your family, your friends, your mortgage, your dog, the society at large, you show up and you have to perform. You have to
Right.
do that thing. And you're right, there's an absolute parallel there. Um, and there's also a level of burnout on both sides. And I would suggest a level of financial precarity on both sides as
Mm.
well, right? But that goes back to this social expectation and reverence, really. Like, nurses, You check any poll, nurses are one of the most respected and trusted professions, right? And musicians are one of the most admired and revered, right? But people forget that they're human beings and they expect them to be able to operate without time off. They expect them to be able, it's almost like, but you do it because you love it and you're really good at it. And you shouldn't have to, like, we don't want, again, in Canada where we have public health care, and in Canada, I would say, again, similarly in the music industry, there's a lot of public funding of our music industry. I think a lot of people don't recognize how much public funding goes into the creation of, and even the entire ecosystem, which is so similar to healthcare. And so there is a parallel that in the music industry, to your point, people are driven to create and to put art out there, and even technical skills as a sound engineer or recording artist or an artist manager, whatever, to contribute to society in that meaningful way.
Right.
And yet once they get a little bit of vocational success, that is, they're able to make a living at it, it becomes harder and harder for them to ever step off that treadmill
I knew you were going
and
to,
to
yeah.
actually take a break, right? Similar?
Yep. Very.
So, and then like as soon as you get a little bit of the brass ring, it becomes harder and harder. And I often use, so this is a good sort of healthcare related. I often use, when I talk about stress and burnout, an image of a heartbeat, which is, dig, dig, and then there's this, dig, dig, and then there's this. I said, but right now, that's like, humans are built for stress, but we're also built for resolution and rest in between those. Right now, we're like, and everybody knows that is not good if you see that on a heart monitor. And so we're dealing with financial precarity. We're dealing with high pressure, high performance, high stakes, relentless pace, invisible emotional labor, psychological labor. I think in both, certainly the data is clear in both professions. The ecosystem, the workplace, is in oftentimes not human. I hate the word toxic is overused. Lots of isms, racism, sexism, otherism, prejudice. And when people can't handle it, we blame the individual and say, oh, they need to develop better resilience or adaptability. And we don't think about how the systems need to change. And I think in both healthcare and in the music space and nursing and musicianship, I think those are real parallels.
Absolutely. Like, that's why I was shaking my head. There's so many parallels in terms of even just that idea. And I don't know if it's the same with music and art. I would hazard a guess that there are some nurses who feel that the work that is done within nursing, they feel that it's a calling. I argue with that because I struggle with it because, again, when I see it in that way and when other nurses see it in that way, that puts us at risk for that type of harm for other industries and other, organizations like hospital systems to really abuse us, right? Because we might be saying like this work is so meaningful to us that it almost takes on this other meaning, and we're going to do it at whatever costs. But at the end of the day, if there's a system that is setting us up to fail, continuing to put pressure on us because we're not getting all the resources that we need, we're underfunded, we are understaffed, under-resourced, but we have this deep-seated feeling that this is the place that we need to be, we put ourselves in risk of being used in a horrible way.
Yeah.
But I can see that very similarly in music and in art, that it's something that, maybe some people feel is innate. Like, I can't pick up a guitar. Like, I've tried. And I think that there is just some people that is their gift, right? And I think some people feel like nursing, that is their gift, but it puts us at such a risk in this way, because when people see it that way, I don't know, I find it so troubling. What are your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. I actually really love the way you put that. I haven't really heard it articulated that way, but you're absolutely right. There's a parallel there. And it blinds us to a lot of things. And one of the things that bubbles up for me when you say that, Amie, is even if you are in a profession that you feel you're meant to be in,
Right.
and it's your calling, the likelihood is that you have also worked really, really, really hard
To get there.
to get there
Yep.
and to stay there and to actually master a craft, right? Because every vocation has not just knowledge, but skill, technical skill, experiential wisdom, etc. And when we remove that part of it, you're right. We think about it less as a workplace and as a vocation and as a profession. And we go, well, it's a calling. Therefore, the work itself is value. And I'm like, but you can't put your kids through university on value alone, right?
100%. Thank you for
So,
saying that.
right. And so I hear
Yeah.
this a lot in my research with people who say, you know, one of the things in the music industry, and I don't think it's the same in nursing, but I think there's a similarity in nursing. A lot of women are in nursing, and there's a lot of imbalance that goes along with that, which is we expect women to be, it's just in their nature to be caring and nurturing, and it gives them value and meaning. Yeah. And they went through a lot of schooling and a lot of clinical training and a lot of everything to save everybody all the time at their own peril in many cases. In the music industry, it's interesting. And I would say this is a crossroads that's certainly more prominent with artists themselves, is that society kind of thinks of it as not a real job. In fact, even the fact that we say, well, I'm going to play tonight, or, you know, I'm playing a gig. We're not even saying I'm working. It's like we're playing. And so people think of it as, well, you love what you do. So like, don't complain. And if you don't think you get paid enough, go get a real job. It is a real job. So
Yeah.
I do think that there's this sort of, we have some blinders on it. And to your point, I think there's an opportunity with both communities to actually step into that agency and step into that power and start talking about this as a professional workplace that includes not just that we love it, but that we've worked really, really hard. We provide a tremendous value, and we absolutely demand to be remunerated appropriately, not just from money, but in a whole bunch of different ways. Time off. Remember that heartbeat? Like, we
Yeah.
can't keep doing this if we don't have any of the breaks in between. And then mistakes get made. And then people are like, to your point, then this sort of love turns into rage. Like, can't believe they make a mistake. Well, again, finite, you know? So I think that's a really important call out. And I don't think we as a society, and thank goodness for podcasts like this and all the work that you're doing, because I don't think that society pauses to think about this very often. We don't think about it until we need it.
100%. And I was actually, this kind of, really goes into the next kind of question I was thinking about. And even just touching on the point where it's just like people will say to you, you're just playing a gig or you're just doing that. There's this weird expectation that the work that we do, whether it's in music or within nursing, it's like, well, that's the expectations of the job, that's what you essentially. I've seen this a lot online. It's like when we talk about abuse or harm or pay, where they're just like, well, that's a profession that you chose. I didn't. Yes, I chose the profession of nursing, but I didn't choose to be underpaid. I didn't choose to be a victim of abuse or racism or any of these things. So, and it's one of those arguments that are just like, I just want to like smack someone. I just wanted to be like, okay, that's a non-argument, because you would never say that to a police officer, to be like, oh, being shot might be a part of the job. Like, that's just what you might have to deal with. Like, it might be like that is a reality, but that's not an expectation. They would never say to a police officer, well, that's what you got yourself into. But I tend to hear that within the world of nursing.
Same.
But I wanted,
In entertainment, it's something, sometimes people refer to it as the cool tax, which is, yeah, but you get to work in this really cool industry, therefore you're not going to get everything, therefore suck it up. And it's kind of like that lets a lot of bad behavior and a lot of infrastructural and systemic bad stuff to continue, because it's like, well, it is what it is, and you knew when you came in here. So again, we take structural problems and we blame the individual.
Yep.
Like, it's so broken.
No, I agree with you. Where I was leading with that was, I was thinking about the idea of, what if there was no music? What if there was no nurses? They burn us out. I think the biggest example I come to when I think about music, and you could tell me your own thoughts, and then we'll talk about nursing too, is I think it was the movie The Pianist, and it was during the Holocaust, and they're talking about these various different things where like they had to hide the music that was created. And again, just how much music means in terms of healing, in terms of being able, like mental well-being, or just the idea behind of like it being such a sacred thing. What if there was no music?
Yeah. Well, I say this all the time because even to think about the current way we consume music, and it's generational, but even still, right now, most of us consume music through a device. We pay a flat fee, and we get all the music ever made known to man for $15 a month.
Right.
Therein lies the problem. Again, I would draw a parallel to if I have a problem here and I live in Canada, I go to the hospital, I get great nursing care, and you know, so we take it for granted. We don't assign real monetary value to it.
Right.
But if you think about music is part of everything. Music, imagine a movie without music. Imagine a football game without music. Imagine a wedding without music, a road trip without music,
Right.
doing your housework without music, a commercial without music, a party without music, a funeral without music. Like goes on and on and on. And then people start going, wait, what? And so then some people say, well, AI is just going to do it because now AI can just make music. And you're like, well, okay, now we're getting into some really dangerous stuff because AI is, of course, scraping all of the human created music and pushing it out through this sort of sausage maker.
Right.
And once again, exploiting the very human experience, work, celebration, etc. and and putting that. And I think that, it's just so similar that we have become, I think, as a society, quite disconnected from the
Yeah,
human beings who bring value into our lives. And everything has become transactional. And that's a really dangerous place.
I
And I see
agree.
that in both healthcare and in the creative industries. Two things
Yeah,
that I think are just taken for granted.
and you mentioned the whole aspect of AI, right? So again, when I think about a world of like, what if there was no nurses and there's this whole conversation about AI? Again, I don't believe, and I believe this, I hope this to be true in the music industry as well, that you cannot replace human connection. Like you just, no matter how hard they try, and I think there is some overinflation about the ability behind AI, right? I think there's a lot of hype. It's an industry where it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Lots of people are trying to get their hands in the pot, particularly where healthcare in the US is a commodity, and here it's starting to become a commodity as well, and we're going to fight that. Where people feel that it has this power where it can do all of these great things and it's going to replace music, it's going to replace nurses, and I definitely believe that it can't. I wouldn't say that um it can't foster creativity in certain areas or work as an adjunct, as a tool, but I would never say that it can replace human connection. And I think that we should be very worried in a world where AI or computer learning can ever, where someone could ever think that it can replace whether it's music or people, because behind that there's so much more, and machine learning is really just whatever we put into it, and it's packed with biases, it's packed with all sorts of different things. So I don't truly believe that it can ever really replace musicians or artists or nurses or healthcare providers.
Yeah. To your point, though, we're living in a dangerous time where
We
both of
are.
these things have become commodified. And when what I've noticed, and I agree with you 100%. I think it's an amazing tool to be used by humans in the right way.
Right.
What AI content creation is amplifying the mediocre middle. So what it's
You're
doing,
right.
right? It's
Yes.
taking away from the pursuit of excellence, of one's own, I know this word has been overused, authentic representation and confluence of experiences and personality and all of those things. And it's just fattening the mediocrity of whatever it is because it's scraping everything and just sort of making an average out of all this stuff, right? And I agree with you. I don't think we'll ever replace the human element in those spaces. That being said, what I also notice with, and also to your point, humans program this stuff. Well, guess what kind of humans program this stuff? They often don't look like you and me.
Right.
Right? So those biases that you're talking about, there's actually some really interesting research. So it started out of U of T, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like a few years ago, there's an incredible researcher out of U of T, a young woman. I'll send you her name afterwards. And she talked about how AI, because of the way it's programmed, gives very biased, sexist, racist, otherist, stigmatizing things. Because if it's programmed by people who have a worldview or a perspective, well, that's what the robots are going to have as a
Right.
perspective. So what happens too is the more we use those tools, we actually, even as the humans interacting with them, we start having less and less full experiences and perspectives, and our lens becomes narrower and narrower and narrower. And again, it goes back to this transactional nature. I was just talking about this with a friend of mine, how uncivil communities seem these days. And I'm sure you see it
Yeah.
in health. I mean, and I think that part of that is people are just closing in, and they're almost dimming their humanness, you know? I don't know, it's kind of icky.
No, I completely understand and know what you're talking about because I've seen it. This is why I've kind of left Twitter. Twitter has been taken over by people who are just simply unkind. And I think that I've just seen some of the worst of humanity come out on social media in that particular way. And again, and I think it's because they can feel that they're one step removed from an individual, where people have just, particularly in healthcare, just talking to healthcare providers in some of the most demeaning ways. And then just when they find out, there's intersections, you're a woman, you're racialized, you're this, you're that, then the language becomes colored with a lot more racism, bias, sexism, all these different things that you had mentioned. And we have a reckoning. We've gotta make a turn here because if this is the way that our society is going to continue to be, again, just thinking about our professions, music and nursing, we're gonna have a very difficult time, even just as a species, kinda coming to terms with how people are not showing that, moral, ethical side to them. And I
Yeah.
think that, both of our professions do, like, we speak to those things, right? Whether it's me taking care of somebody or talking about the social injustices within the system, or you, as an artist, talking about it through your music, or people being able to connect with you through music. So again, like, I feel like there's a lot that we can learn. I wanted to ask you this question here, just even thinking about like what can we do. So you often had mentioned that and describe music as the connective tissue that helped you rebuild yourself after anything that has happened with you. What do you think for nurses or even artists that might be listening, that might be at their lowest points, that are seeing these episodes within humanity? How can we share these moments with it, whether it's music, and shift that idea from it being a performance to being survival and being able to, understand what's happening, but to, I guess, just to kind of move from a place from burnout to healing.
Yeah. That's like the $1,000,000 question. I wish
Yeah,
I had a
really.
simple answer. It's one of those things where it's simple but not easy, right? The first thing that comes to mind, and certainly something we talk a lot about in terms of burnout, in terms of mental health, workplace psychological health and safety, is that we have to pause and zoom out a little bit to recognize that in many cases, we're not the problem. The system is the problem. And that's not to say we don't have responsibility, accountability, and agency to do things. I do think that we need to have a level of self compassion and self respect and self care, although that word has been like overused. Like, it's not about putting a bath bomb into your bubble bath, but good for you if you do that. But to recognize that setting healthy boundaries while also cultivating meaningful relationships with human beings with whom you feel seen, heard, and understood. Because all those things we've already talked about really leads us to feeling isolated and alone and not belonging. And then we really ramp up the imposter syndrome. And then we feel like I'm a failure. And what am I doing? And I don't even know what to do with my life. And how am I the only one? That's the other thing about, there's another interesting study about how social media and media in general makes us all feel like we're the minority when really
Right.
we're the majority. The majority of
I
people are
believe that.
looking at
Yep.
that and saying, everyone is doing this, but I must be missing something. But really, it's the other way around. So there's this collective, like, cognitive dissonance, and it creates a lot of inward sort of shaming and blaming. But then we really lose our sense of agency and empowerment. And I think one of the things we all need to do is to slow down and to get back to basics, which is, you think about basic biological, psychological, and social needs: rest, movement, nutrition, water, connection, joy, play, nature. I notice myself sometimes I'm just going and going, and I have to go, what am I doing? It's almost like I can feel that I'm just being yanked around.
Right.
So if we can put some sort of practice in place that reminds us to just step off that treadmill, step off that hamster wheel for a second, and to say, it goes, the recovery rooms use this a lot, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And when in my workshops, I always talk about HALTMO, which is hungry, angry, lonely, tired movement outside. If
Yep.
you're feeling grumpy or whatever, or burnt out, ask yourself, do I need to eat something? Am I really angry, pissed off, disconnected, lonely, isolated? Do I need to see a friend? Do I need to watch like my favorite movie that just always makes me feel good? Do I need to listen to my favorite song and dance around my kitchen? Do I need to snuggle with my cute little baby? Or, it's kind of like getting back to basics, because all these things we've talked about systemically have just become so big and so fast and so beyond what we're evolutionarily prepared for.
Right. No, I think you're right. Yeah. And I love that because I think that is so much like nursing, right? Where, we have these grueling shifts, and I'm sure music is like that too, where, you're at something for like hours on end. For example, in nursing, like our shifts are 12 hours, and it's just like especially if you work nights, oh God, you start at 7:30 and you're going to 7:30 in the morning, and you're just like, okay, well, now let's add on these other parts of like family responsibility, and you just feel like you're this like hamster in a wheel. You're just going through the motions, and you don't take that time to be like, maybe you snapped at somebody and you're like, oh wait, that's not like me. Maybe it is. Maybe there's hunger. Am I actually angry, or is it like there's other things that I haven't done? And I've just realized that just even for me, I'm like, okay, maybe it's because I need to go outside. Like maybe I just need some fresh air. And I think most people would really surprise themselves if they use a model like yours. And I think it's amazing that just recognizing those pieces. And again, we can't control what happens within our outside of our realm, but we can control ourselves. And we can control kind of like, okay, you know what? Maybe I do need to take a minute for rest. Maybe that rest looks like a walk in the park. Maybe that rest looks like you said, curling up, watching a movie, listening to your favorite song. Pausing and doing it deliberately, I
Yeah.
think, is what's important. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to like, again, go easy on yourself with all the other shoulds that happen in our lives. And I will say, particularly as women, there's this in the ether, this thing that your house should look perfect, you should
Yes.
look perfect, your clothes should look perfect, your kids should be perfect, your relationship should be perfect. So when you're done with that 12-hour shift, you also then pile on, oh, I should go home, and my house doesn't look like that, and my
Right.
kids don't look like that, and I'm not. And I was like, yeah, you just need to go home and just do the basics. And the other thing that's really similar between the two is, like you said, a 12-hour shift. And people have an interaction with a nurse or a musician or a sound tech or whatever for such a tiny part of that. And they think that's all it is.
Right.
You have no idea of all of the other hours on top of the previous day and all of the other hours. And then the emotional toll, like you said, you could have had people who have died. You could have had other people who've gone through a lot. You could be dealing with your own grief. Another common thing, musculoskeletal challenges, chronic health conditions that people are working through, chronic pain, chronic, fatigue and overwhelm and burnout. No wonder we snap.
Yep.
I just think we don't think about the human beings behind these professions a lot.
Yeah. You're 100% right. I think this is where, again, we need to continue to shift the conversation to be like, yes, we are in these industries, but we are wives, we are spouses, we are friends, we are human beings as well. And that behind all of that you love, your family being taken care of, the patient being discharged better than they are, the music that you love to listen to, your favorite song, the words on that page, someone took a lot of time and a lot of effort to do all of that. And just how do we, again, find our voice? And I think one of my last questions here is to, musicians or nurses who feel that they've lost their voice within these systems that can be so broken. What process would you say or expressions that you've used that can teach people about that self-worth or to find their voice again?
Yeah, that's hard. I think we all have a level of imposter syndrome. I certainly do. I think it goes back to community. I think we've become really disconnected. We tend to be very much like through one-dimensional transactional relationships. Our families are spread out. Our communities are spread out. And so the one thing that I really think we all need to do is to, again, find those people to interact with where you feel seen, heard, and understood, where you
Yeah,
feel
no, I
like
think
I'm
that's
not the
important.
only one going through this. And then to really reflect on that and connect and not just do it. I love being able to talk with you on Zoom, but also we figured out we're just down the highway. So it'd be fun to
Right.
have coffee together like real humans sometime.
Yeah.
And I say, like, as much as possible, like, we are human beings and we need to connect with human beings.
Right.
And so that's the number one thing is to find community. In Canada, in the music industry, one of the things we're launching in the new year is more peer community connects, because everyone feels like they are alone in their struggles. And yet I hear that from everyone. Therefore, we need to be coming together
Yeah.
to recognize that we're not alone, and to also recognize that there's power in agency, there's power in community, there's power and advocacy, like the work that you're doing of saying the systems have to change, because this sort of, human cost is just not acceptable anymore.
Yeah, it's not. And I think that you're right. I think that we have lost a little bit of, no, I shouldn't even say a little bit. I think we have lost a sense of community. I think that there's been so much polarization between, over the last couple of years with the pandemic, misinformation, just so much division. And I think that we have to come to a term where we're just like, okay, we might have different ideas, different opinions, but how can we still come together as a collective? Because it can't be everything that we're polarized on. And
No.
how do we find that space where we do find our people? We do find the people that shares like-mindedness and actually just get out and start seeing people again. I think people spend way too much time on social media. Like, I am definitely one of those parents that was just like, "Hey, I heard about the ban in New Zealand. I would definitely ban social media for my children.
Yeah.
My kids
Well,
have no
and
access."
because we both know from a healthcare perspective, right? I study mental health, you're in healthcare. There's no debate. It is not good for humans, and it is absolutely terrible for children.
Well,
There's
what do we
no
used to
debate.
do when we were bored?
Yeah.
We went
You would
outside and played.
Right. I remember. I mean, boredom is actually the place from which all creativity springs,
Yep.
right? If we're
Yep.
never bored, we're never gonna solve problems. We're never gonna create things. We're never gonna go outside and like go, oh hey, what are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing? That's how you make friends and you develop things. So it's a dangerous place Yeah. Oh my gosh.
No, and I think that that's what we need to put the screens down and find a space where we can all connect together. And I feel like music does that pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. And getting together. I mean, this is why people love getting together in a room and seeing a live event, whether it's a massive arena or whether it's a small coffee house. It's as old as time, you
I
know?
agree.
And so we can all leverage some of those really basic, classic human ways of connecting to sort of just
Absolutely.
give us baseline health.
I agree. Last little fun question before we go. So, what is one song that is your go-to for your mental health, just to make you feel good that, that you put on, you jam to, whatever. What is that one song for you?
I have a lot, as you can imagine,
I'm
but the
sure.
first thing that comes to mind, because in the pandemic, I listened to this every single day, Superstition by Stevie Wonder.
Oh my
Because
goodness, love that song.
when you kick it at the very beginning, ba-ding, ba, ba-ding, ba, but I mean, it's just right there. If you're not dancing within
Yeah.
30 seconds, I don't know what's wrong.
No, I agree with you. That's an amazing song. I love that song. Every time I think about that song, I don't know why. I think about the Obamas. I don't know. I don't know why there's that connection. Maybe there was something that he danced to a Stevie. Oh yes, he did dance to a Stevie Wonder song. But yeah, like I always think about the Obamas when I think about Stevie Wonder. But for me, it's actually not an upbeat song. I don't know why. Redemption Song by Bob Marley. I don't know. Something about it for me, and I really like the orchestra version as well. It just really speaks to me in terms of like the mood, the sense of urgency about like we need to be able to find that sense within ourselves to, speak about things that we might see that needs to be talked about, and then to find that redemption within ourselves. So that for me is like if I'm feeling like I put that on and I'm just like he was wise, like just had some knowledge there that I'm just like, yeah, he was ahead of his time. And
And,
too bad we lost him too soon.
yeah, and that one too, you're right, very different song, and yet a very plaintive, simple rhythm that everyone can immediately connect to. Boom, doom, like it's just right there, so
Yep.
within the first couple bars, you can be there. And I think both of those are, and I agree with you. Some of my favorite songs are the ones that make me really sad. But it's because it's a way of processing our emotions, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so good, bad, or sad, we got to move stuff through. And
But feeling we could do something though, right? Like I
yeah,
feel like music is a powerful motivator.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you so much, Catherine, for coming on the Gritty Nurse podcast. Before we leave, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to throw out there?
There's probably 5 more hours of stuff that you and I could talk about.
Well, that's why we have to meet up at a coffee shop because you don't
I
live too far.
I just think there are so many interesting parallels. The more we talk about it, the more, and I do think that helps to animate the conversation. And I think that's the main thing, is to get together with people, to talk about things, to find the similarities. Like you said, even with this and this, we're actually way more similar than we are different. Don't fall down the rabbit hole of the algorithmic gong
Right.
show. Find the humans, recognize that for the most part, you all want the same thing, you know? So connection, community, curiosity, those are the things that I think will really help get us through it.
Yeah, that it's almost like saying that although we do different things, we're really not that different altogether.
Yeah.
So much
Yeah.
similarities there. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
thank you so
Thank
much for
you so
coming on.
much for having me here. It was so delightful, and I'm looking forward to our next chat.
Absolutely. And our next chat won't be online.
That's right. That's
Maybe
right.
we can meet up in the new year or yeah, absolutely.
We'll do it for sure. Thank you, Amie.
Thank you, Catherine. Looking for a great gift for a nurse or someone who needs to learn about nursing? Check out my national best-selling book, The Wisdom of Nurses, Stories of Grit from the Bedside. Thank you so much for listening to The Gritty Nurse with Amie Archibald-Varley. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or any other podcast platform, please hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss out on any awesome episodes from The Gritty Nurse. Thank you so much and stay tuned until next time. Stay gritty.